possible harm from insisting that God authored the Bible. Besides belief in a God-authored Bible giving rise to hundreds of contradictory interpretations, those who believe that God authored every passage of the Hebrew Bible, which was separate and apart from the church's writings for 1,200 years, may conclude that everything therein should be followed. Besides the fact that science and technology are minimized, some examples are: every populace, without exception out of God's chosen people, are depicted as utterly depraved barbarians. Every reader conveniently deems him or herself one of the chosen people. Even the main characters, role models, don't merely exhibit common human failings. Sometimes their failings are worse than those of the average person. Their behavior has been used to justify polygamy and other nonsense. Deuteronomy 22:13-21 is ignorant and possibly harmful, as we cannot prove whether or not a woman ever had sex, as hymens are often broken through mundane physical activity, while some women who had sexual intercourse retained intact hymens. And commands to marry and reproduce cause harassment and denigration of singles, and now our world suffers from overpopulation. Also, pets are non-existent, and animals are slaughtered while men are told to subdue the earth, not protect the environment. Hard drug dealers who have promoted the death, suffering, and enslavement of millions, destroying them physically, mentally, and spiritually, are not even mentioned. The word sorcery in Scripture, translated from the Greek word pharmakeia, only included substances that had spells cast on them, or substances given to someone to make them susceptible to mental suggestion. That has nothing to do with today's modern drugs and their use or abuse. So the Bible has no proscribed punishment for dope dealers whatsoever, while picking up sticks, tapping rocks, and other trivial actions called for the death penalty in the Old Testament. The Hebrew Bible supported the institution of slavery, Leviticus 22:44-46 and other texts. New Testament slaves were more like servants, so-called slaves. Dozens of other pertinent topics crucial to modern life are excluded. If God authored a book, he could have predicted the future and relayed modern life beforehand. Stories such as the creation and Noah's Ark inspire children and sometimes adults, but other stories are far less innocuous. Although the book of Psalms is very inspiring, in Psalms 58, the writer talks about washing his feet in people's blood. This vengeful and gross sentiment contradicts Jesus' humble example of washing others' feet and loving one's enemies. If Jesus was God, how is Psalms God-authored? And consider all the Old Testament warfare, murder, rape, pillaging, and mayhem, which reflects on its authors. In defense of that, I've heard, before Jesus, Prince of Peace, peace could not exist. Yet peace did exist, and Christianity teaches that Christ was a pre-existent being. Many American Christian believers call themselves God's righteous ones who fight against evil empires. Many Jews still consider themselves the chosen people, far superior to everyone else. And many Middle Easterners who use the Bible as a backdrop for their Quran call America the great Satan, battling others in Allah's name. And each group has a book filled with examples of killing everyone else. How can we not see the harm in lauding stories of men hearing voices that told them to butcher other people? Even if those who were killed deserved it because they were completely evil, why wouldn't God instantly destroy all the wicked himself, like he was said to have done to Sodom and Gomorrah, instead of having men deal with the negative psychological impact of brutal warfare? Besides, much of the Old Testament is simply a redundant, the children of Israel smote so-and-so with the sword, saith the Lord, instead of teaching anything new. So let us break the chains and shackles that come with deifying these writings. More observations. The most glaring inconsistency is that most believers in a God-authored book never read the entire book they claim is God-authored. Others ignore anywhere from small parts on up to most of it, rejecting whatever, God wrote, supposedly wrote, that they don't like. Then most so-called God-authored books are copyrighted. If a book is copyrighted by Joe Schmo, its author is Joe Schmo. If it's copyrighted by the Flim Flam Company, it was authored by Flim Flam employees. If a copyrighted book is God-authored, it better say copyright by God. If you insist on the Bible being divinely inspired, at least use a non-copyrighted translation, such as the authorized King James Version. Also, diverse groups disagree on how many books constitute the Hebrew Scriptures. Some Jews only accept the first 5 books, the Torah. Protestants say 39, Catholics say 46, the Orthodox canonized 49, and some historical groups have 53, making an 80-book Bible. The Septuagint, Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures, which Jesus quoted from, had all 53. This division and the occasional brokenness of the texts, besides the lack of vowels in ancient Hebrew, causes words, word meanings, and passages to be perpetually disputed by believers in a God-authored book. As far as the 10 Commandments, they only apply to one's neighbor. The scrolls from which these precepts came from had no first word capitalization, commas, or periods. So in Exodus chapter 20, it says, "Thou shalt not kill, commit adultery against, or steal from thy Jewish neighbor." This explains the apparent contradiction in Deuteronomy 20:13-14, where the Israelites were told to kill, commit adultery against, and steal from others. The Levitical precept, "Love your neighbor as yourself," Leviticus 19:18, only applied to fellow Israelites as well. Besides being a monument to Jewish racial supremacy, the Hebrew Bible does not produce faith. Half of Jews are basically atheists. Jesus quoting the Old Testament certainly doesn't mean he endorsed the whole thing. Rather, this appears to be circumstantial. He could not have quoted the New Testament since it was not yet in existence. And since he was of Jewish lineage, he naturally used Hebrew texts as a reference point. If he was Indian, he would undoubtedly have quoted the Hindu Vedas instead. Besides, most Jews rejected Christ even though he accommodated himself to them. By ignoring their corrupt narratives, he might have been completely rejected. Yet he incorporated them since prophetic light still shone through Hebraistic squalor. Also, fables can beautifully illustrate truth. Although the Old Testament, actually the Jewish Tanakh, was quoted many times in Christian scripture, as stated earlier, this is only a small fraction of it. Jesus and his apostles knew how to gather gems from those scribblings like miners panning for small gold nuggets within gallons of mud. But many people cannot and better leave it alone. Besides, the Old Testament God cannot be the true God according to the Old Testament, because it says that the true God immediately answers his religious leaders with miracles and false gods do not. 1 Kings 18:22-39. Since calling on the Old Testament God does not result in immediate dramatic miracles, the Old Testament is self-refuted. Jesus made it perfectly clear that the Jewish leaders were terribly corrupt. Yet those Jews were the ones responsible for collecting and preserving the Hebrew Scriptures. Yet we trust those storylines to be an unadulterated reflection of God's will. Rather, I would expect Jewish leaders to maintain texts that were corrupt and self-serving, since Jesus declared them corrupt, those leaders corrupt. So the Old Testament, so-called Old Testament, is a cracked antique relic which gives Christianity validity via historic reference. That's good. But as an antique collector's bottle, let's keep it in the curio cabinet, only drinking our new wine from new bottles. Matthew 19:17, King James Bible. Take care.